Coming up in this episode, Ferman and the BBFC entered the new decade, and into a brief lull of calm. Unknowingly, however, Ferman would sow the seeds of his own destruction near the very beginning of the decade. However, we begin this instalment at the close of the last decade, when in 1989 the 12 certificate was introduced for cinema. The first recipient of which was Tim Burton's Batman, and I personally remember seeing the trailer on TV when I was a kid, and thinking that the 12 was a typo. The 12 was introduced to bridge the huge gap between PG and 15. Inexplicably, however, the 12 certificate was not introduced to video until a staggering 5 years after its cinema debut. Even by the standards of the hyper-cautious Ferman, this seems a bit odd. Just as a personal aside, I remember seeing the film when it came out on video a year later, when I was 8, and being terrified by the scene where the Joker spits out the joke teeth. Looking back now, I just think the darkly comic overtone of the scene went over my head. Nonetheless, since 12 certificates were automatically bumped to 15 on video, it certainly didn't surpass the boundaries of acceptability, and had more to do with my unfamiliarity with the darker elements of the source material. I, like many others, grew up with the Camp TV series, and was oblivious to the origins of this dark interpretation. Weaponry in films had long since troubled Ferman, but with the release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie in 1990, it marked the first time the dreaded nunchucks entered a mainstream film aimed at children. Ferman's aversion of martial art weaponry began when he joined the BBFC in the mid-70s. Kung Fu mania was apparently gripping Britain. This is perhaps where Ferman's perceived hypersensitivity began. Ferman's response was to cut all sight of weaponry from films, especially nunchucks. This was not confined solely to children's films either. Bruce Lee movies too were cut. A good example was Lo Wei's Fist of Fury, which was released on video, heavily cut, on the Rank label in 1986. It was this version that persisted also into the 1990s. All versions during Ferman's time were cut. However, the pre-cert copy of the film was completely uncut. Ironically, many pre-certs remained on video shelves post-VRA, albeit with the obligatory BBFC certificate crudely stickered on. I remember watching my cousin's cut video version again and again, thinking it was great. Even cut Bruce Lee movies still have their magic. But then I inadvertently bought a pre-cert copy in a second-hand video shop, which crucially had no certificate stickers on the box, so I got away with it. My cousin and I then watched it for what must have been the 100th time. Only this time, something wonderful happened. In the scene where Bruce Lee visits and takes on the Japanese school single-handedly, we were used to just seeing Lee beat everyone up with his fists and feet. But in this version, it went further.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up, they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a step, and a kicking from the hip. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning.
I remember my cousin and I just looking at each other dumbfounded. It was as if we imagined it. We kept rewinding and re-watching because we couldn't figure out why this version showed more. We were only about 8 or 9 and neither of us knew about films being cut or even banned at this stage. What I remember vividly, and I'm sure many others will remember this as well, is the weird jarring jolt you feel when, after years of seeing a cut version of a film again and again, the uncut version suddenly deviates from what you knew of the film's narrative and delivers unexpected but intensely pleasurable forbidden fruit. Ironically, seeing uncut versions of films after seeing cut versions made the previously censored scenes all the more striking. Obviously, this anecdote only acts to highlight one of the many flaws of the video nasty era. Since the powers that be were so intently focused on horror movies during the pre-cert era of the 1980s, they overlooked other genres. This is why it was possible to see uncut Bruce Lee movies on video well past the VRA deadlines, but only in certain shops. For someone so vehemently against nunchucks, Ferman well and truly dropped the ball on that one. And what did my cousin and I do later that day? We stole the broomsticks out of our mum's brooms, found chains and made our own nunchucks in my dad's shed. With practice we got better and better at swinging them too. We didn't, however, use them on each other or anyone else. So there you go. I still laugh with my cousin about this, and years later we both saw the irony, because without meaning to, we had both given credence to Ferman's policy. It was not until 2001, however, until we got to see it again in widescreen when the new BBFC director Robin Duvall passed it uncut legally for the first time. Meanwhile, back in 1990, not long since the double whammy of The Last Temptation of Christ and Visions of Ecstasy, another legal headache was about to come upon the BBFC. A Pakistani film called International Gorillas was submitted to the BBFC. The film is a fantastical action movie which would otherwise been unremarkable if not for the fact the main villain is unambiguously based on a real-life person. The controversy surrounding Salman Rushdie and his infamous book The Satanic Verses seemed, at the time, unlikely to be of concern to the BBFC, since printed media was well and truly out of their remit. However, they faced a problem when International Gorillas washed up on their doorstep in Soho Square. For Ferman and the BBFC, this was precisely the sort of controversy they didn't want. Much less because, at the time, Rushdie had a bounty on his head in the Arab community. The BBFC faced a very real moral dilemma which, if they had got it wrong, could have meant that Rushdie, if he was killed, they could have found themselves as an accessory. True to Ferman's better safe than sorry policy that ran throughout his career, he banned it. Strangely, however, the ban was lifted 2 months later after Rushdie said that while he thought the film was, quote, a distorted, incompetent piece of trash, unquote, he promised not to sue. He later said, quote, if that film had been banned, it would have become the hottest video in town. Everyone would have seen it, unquote. Rushdie's stance was more than justified as the film, a huge hit in Pakistan, disappeared virtually without a trace in Britain. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, released in 1991, was another film that caused headaches for the BBFC. The discrepancy between the British PG and the American PG-13 was all too apparent in this instance. For many years, the UK version had censorship issues in order to maintain a PG rating. The cinema version was cut by 14 seconds with edits made to the opening scene and a single use of the F-word towards the end of the film. The 1991 and 1995 video versions lost a further 18 seconds of footage, which completely removed any trace of the hand amputation scene and other scenes of language, violence and sexual threat, owing to complaints made to the BBFC from parents. The film is now passed uncut at 12. Finally, in 1991, another censorship landmark came to be. However, it was one that, with hindsight, was one innocent step on an otherwise treacherous road for Ferman. The visual representation of real sexual activity. The Lover's Guide could justly be seen as a move in the right direction for the BBFC. It was merely a modernised but just as clinical version of the sort of films passed for the cinema since the 1970s. There was little controversy besides what was whipped up by the tabloids. Woolworths refused to stock it, but that was about it. For a country that had pretended to enjoy learning about naturism for so long, then was able to watch more explicit porn in Soho cinemas, at least The Lover's Guide had some benefit of doubt. The narrative, as the BBFC themselves had noted, was unsensational. Ferman was very much in favour of further education, especially as he himself had been a visiting lecturer at polytechnics, lecturing on areas such as substance abuse and schoolchildren before taking his post at the BBFC. However, one can't help wonder if Ferman gave a moment's pause to think of what befell his predecessor, Stephen Murphy, when he himself passed a similar film for cinemas, called More About the Language of Love. This picture was taken just after Murphy and Harlech were forced to appear before the Old Bailey, and you can see the apprehension clearly on Murphy's face. It's the face of a doomed man, and the final nail in his coffin, which was, at the end of the day, a relatively innocuous sex education film. So, within historical context, Ferman's move could be seen as, if you'll pardon the pun, quite a ballsy thing to do. In the next episode, Vipco, the bête noir of the video nasty era, makes a comeback, and Tarantino makes his debut at the BBFC with Reservoir Dogs, and yet another moral panic ensues with the murder of James Bolger, resulting in the video limbo period of the mid-1990s.